welcome to the first episode of the Leftist Film Analysis Podcast. That'll be what we're calling it for now. We may or may not come up with a better name, and we'll let you know.
We're just trying to avoid getting sued.
Right.
Because everything we came up with first was definitely going to get us sued.
But it was really good. All right, let's introduce ourselves.
All right, well, I'm Mitchell.
And I am Mike. And we are a couple of political nerds and movie nerds alike. And so we thought we'd combine the two and see what we could extract from films from a political standpoint, specifically from a leftist political standpoint. You don't have to be a leftist to enjoy the podcast, I don't believe, but we want to be upfront about the fact that that's where we are politically, and we're going to embrace that and see what we can get out of some of these films that may have political messages or undercurrents or tones in some way.
Yeah, it's just fun to I mean, not only watch them, but see what directors and actors are trying to squeeze in there and get some little message across, and it's always fun to try and dissect them from watching them. Right,
and we're not gonna, it's art, so it's very much subjective and open to interpretation, and we're not going to at any point try and tell you what the filmmakers wanted to have come through or what impact they wanted for it to have. We will be quoting some of these filmmakers because we want to convey it honestly, and we want you to hear it from them as well. Other than that, we're just going to be kind of having discussions about the political nature of these films, current films and past films. We're not going to tell you what they're about. We're just going to tell you what messages we found, what may have jumped out at us. And I think we're going to start today with a couple of Oscar-winning films. It's, of course, just after Oscar season, and it was a political year for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of issues out there that people are concerned about, and rightfully so. And there are a lot of political messages in these films, at least from our perspective.
Yeah.
So we are going to start with a couple of films from the Oscars this year, made in 2017. But if there are other films that anyone would like us to review, or if you have your own comments on these films, please feel free to email us at leftistfilmpodcast@gmail.com. And we would love to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
I think that's it, man. I think we should go ahead and dive on into them.
All right, here we go. We're going to start with Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, made in 2017, written and directed by Martin McDonough, starring Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, and Sam Rockwell. The film was recognized at the Oscars for its acting. Frances McDormand won Best Actress for her performance, and Sam Rockwell won Best Supporting Actor for his performance. Both very good performances and very worthy of the recognition that they received. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the film. I'm going to give you a little overview of the plot according to IMDb. After months have passed without a culprit in her daughter's murder case, Mildred Hayes, played by Academy Award winner Frances McDormand, makes a bold move painting 3 signs leading into her town with a controversial message directed at William Willoughby, played by Academy Award nominee Woody Harrelson, the town's revered chief of police. When his second-in-command, Officer Dixon, played by Academy Award winner Sam Rockwell, an immature mother's boy with a penchant for violence, gets involved, the battle between Mildred and Ebbing's law enforcement is only exacerbated. And that is, again, the plot according to IMDb. So, let's start out. Tell me what you thought of the film overall.
I thought it was solid. I don't know if it really earned the praise that so many gave it. The first time we watched it was definitely. I'm glad that we ended up watching it twice, because the first time was we have a rating system of like out of 10. At first it was probably like a 4 or a 5 for me, because everything was so coincidental, and that still carries over into the second viewing.
It does.
But the first one was it just didn't do anything for me, and I didn't understand all of the praise that it was getting. But upon the second viewing, it really shaped it better for me. I thought the performances were a lot better, and it still carried over with the coincidences, and it was just too many things happened in succession that was
right,
just too written. You could tell it suffered from a little bit of bad writing, in my opinion.
And it's a good story as far as the writing is concerned.
Sure.
But some critiques that I had after the first viewing, and this is, spoiler alert, that we're going to talk about a lot of things that happen in the film. So, just putting that out there. In Willoughby's letter that he writes to Frances McDormand's character after he commits suicide, he says that this case could be solved by way of something to the effect of, somebody overhears somebody else bragging about the crime in a bar. And that's paraphrased. But, and then, later on in the film, that actually happens. That occurs. Or so we think for the time being. But Officer Dixon, played by Sam Rockwell, is sitting in a booth next to a couple of guys bragging about a crime that is very familiar. It fits much of what this other crime, much of the details and things. So that is just one example of a really kind of coincidental occurrence in a film, and it did not seem all that natural. But I get it. It's the point was made, and I thought overall it was a good film. I liked it a lot better on the second viewing, of course, as Mitchell said. I didn't know what to expect going into the theater the first time. I think that had a lot to do with it. I really wanted to love it. I had really, really high expectations, and it was just a lot different than I thought it would be. And, so there's some bias there as well. And, but I thought it was a good film. I like it a lot better on the second viewing because I knew a little more of what to expect. Some of the things that happen in the film, such as Willoughby's suicide, are really kind of jarring, and that's
it's not a movie to expect a lot of happiness from.
No, and I mean we didn't necessarily expect that going in, but it's a drama, but it can get very bleak at points, and maybe what you want to happen doesn't always happen. And
I think everybody in Ebbing, Missouri, or at least the main characters are probably all shitty people.
Yeah, I think a lot of them. I mean,
except for Peter Dinklage's character.
Right.
I can't seem to remember his name at the moment.
I don't remember his character's name in the film, but he was really good, and he
didn't have to hold that ladder for her.
No, he did not have to show up and hold that ladder for her. So let's dig in a little bit here. Overall, good film.
I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I think a 7.5 for me would be fair.
Agreed. I would probably have given it a 6 or a 6.5 on the first viewing. I think that went up a full point. I would give that a 7.5 as well.
Yeah, I think that's 7.5 a fair.
Now, and I'm very sympathetic to people who loved it and would give it more than that. I understand that.
That's fine. And
I understand it much more after the second viewing, and certainly based on the performances. And it was a nice looking film.
Yeah,
there were a lot of
very well shot.
And there was good writing too,
sure,
along with the some of the things that were a little bit coincidental. And but anyways, all right, let's dig in to some of the more political things in the film. Obviously, it's kind of a political film anyways. It's hard to separate the politics from this one, really. It seems. It is a mother, a woman who is a single mother raising her son, her teenage son, and dealing with the death of her teenage daughter, who was raped and killed. And so there's a lot going on there. It also takes place in a kind of what we have to assume is a small town.
Yeah.
I believe Ebbing, Missouri is a fictional place, right?
I never honestly looked it up to see.
I've heard that it's a fictional place.
Okay.
So,
well, that's news to me. That's an interesting little tidbit.
So it's interesting the way that someone who is Martin McDonagh is British, and it's interesting to see the way that he views kind of a small Midwestern, almost Southern in some ways, town. And, we're from Tennessee, full disclosure here, so we kind of know what those towns look like. We've been through them and lived in them some as well. But it's very interesting to see the depiction of these places, and there is a lot of bigotry, a lot of racism, and that I think falls pretty squarely upon Sam Rockwell's character, Officer Dixon.
Terribly.
Yeah, he's not a good guy at the beginning of this film. I'm not sure he's a good guy at the end of the film, but some say he's redeemed himself to an extent. We'll get into that a little bit later. But, it really highlights bigotry and racism in the U.S.
Absolutely.
In these areas. Go ahead.
Mildred, when the news folks came out to her house to interview her, one of the first things she says when the officers are not torturing black people,
right?
They're also not getting anything else done, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. To paraphrase, she alludes to it.
Red, the owner of the company that does the billboards,
leases it out.
He says something about specifically to Dixon about torturing black people. So yeah,
Dixon's got a reputation.
He does. Unfortunately, he seems to have a habit for it.
Right. And I don't know if that was kind of conditioned into him at some.
Well, if you look at his mom,
yeah, that's what I was getting to. Is his mom? You know, he's a mama's boy, and there's nothing wrong with that unless your mom is a big old racist, and she kind of seems to be.
Yeah, she just oozed it basically.
Yeah. So she was not. You know, he had it from the start. You know, those ideas, I guess, were kind of
just conditioned in, like you said.
I guess so. And they were very obvious. He wore them on his sleeve, and it's also not only personally, but the fact that in some of these areas in the U.S., those kinds of beliefs and ideas, however apparent on the surface, are not really rooted out, and that really doesn't always disqualify you from serving in the police force or in some of these places, and so that's concerning as well. And I think the film does a lot to highlight that you know, everybody in town seems to know that Officer Dixon has a certain penchant for this.
Not to interrupt you.
Go for it.
But Willoughby even said if you got rid of all the racists, there'd only be 3 cops left.
Did he?
Yeah.
I didn't even remember that.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense.
He sure did.
So, you know, you see right now this is a time in the U.S., and it's not just right now, but it is kind of coming to a head right now, and there's a lot of issues involving racism and bigotry in the police forces across the U.S. right now, and this does a great job at highlighting that, and you know, like I said, placing that on the shoulders of a character that, you know, is almost himself, shows kind of seems to be burdened by it, you know. So it's very interesting as well that institution is not effectively in the film and in current affairs. They are not effectively as an institution rooting out racism and bigotry and these things. And real quick, while we're on the topic, an example of the police force not actively weeding out these kinds of behaviors, and in fact using them to some sort of other end or agenda, is in California. There was an instance of police actually working with neo-Nazi groups to identify counter-protesters to those groups. Specifically, there's an article published by The Guardian by Sam Levin in San Francisco. It's the article's titled "California Police Worked with Neo-Nazis to Pursue Anti-Racist Activists," documents show. And just to read a little snippet of that, California police investigating a violent white nationalist event worked with white supremacists in an effort to identify counter-protesters and sought the prosecution of activists with, quote, anti-racist beliefs, court documents show.
I don't want to veer too far into a personal rant or anything, but
it's a political podcast, so
yeah, I know, but I mean, we're mainly here to analyze films from a political perspective, not rant. But man, that's so enraging and just absolutely disgusting. And I don't know why we're at a point in time where cops are working with fucking Nazis
It's disconcerting as hell, man, because it's, especially with public funding and things like that, going towards a resource where that is an institution meant to, or at least supposedly meant to, serve and protect, right, the public and the community and public interests, and that is not what's occurring there, and it's a shame.
Yeah, Nazis are the last people that are wanting to protect.
Right, fuck them.
Other than white people.
And yeah, fuck Nazis.
Fuck Nazis, yeah, for sure.
And if you don't like it, if you're a Nazi, you're in the wrong fucking place. Don't know how you got this far into the podcast. Anyways, yeah, it's an institutional failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Along many lines, and it's not new, but it has to be dealt with. But anyways, the film does a really good job of highlighting those behaviors and ideas and things, and kind of putting them under a microscope and exposing them for what they are, which is baseless bullshit. So Officer Dixon has a tough time throughout the movie, but he does end up, some would say, somewhat redeemed. He goes through a lot of shit, and he ends up being the guy overhearing the conversation about what he thinks is this crime committed against Mildred Hayes' daughter. And he picks a fight with the guy, and he scratches or claws at his face in order to get some DNA under his fingernails, so that he can test that against what was recovered from the crime scene originally, the Hayes case,
right.
Crime scene, and so there is an effort to, I guess, do the right thing there. But, this is after, it's worth mentioning, this is after he throws Red out of a second-story window for allowing the billboards to be up. And after, this is kind of in a fit of rage.
It was after Willoughby.
It was after Willoughby's suicide, right? And, you have to understand the emotions there.
Sure.
That was his, he looked up to Willoughby. That was his, I guess, best friend, mentor, all of those things. And he saw Red allowing those billboards to be up as causing or contributing to Willoughby's suicide, which was not the case. Willoughby stated in the letter written to Mildred Hayes. But Officer Dixon didn't know that, and he walked from the Ebbing police station across the street to the business that leases out the billboards, and he beat the shit out of Red and punched a woman in the face on his way out, punched her right in the face, and threw Red out of the window. And so it's pretty hard to come back from that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that you're not irredeemable after that, but nonetheless,
I would believe that that's from a liberal mindset. Like, oh, he's racist and he threw somebody out, but he's helping he ends up helping.
Right, and there, at this point, maybe we should make the distinction of leftists and liberals.
Sure.
They're not always, or even often, depending on who you're talking to, in the same camp. Liberals can be very moderate on a lot of issues that leftists think more action is needed on. I guess is a very simple way of putting it. Yeah. But we consider ourselves to be leftists, And we won't, I guess, take too much time to define that.
Sure.
But there is a distinction between liberals and leftists in a lot of circles. So when mentioning a liberal mindset, it's not necessarily a good thing. It is. It can be looked at as very much a moderate or a short-sighted approach. And
yeah,
so,
they still end up allowing a little bit too much.
Right, and so that's kind of, at the end of the film you want to say, oh, he did the right thing, and he but I mean it ultimately didn't lead to really anything. And
yeah,
another spoiler here, it came up that DNA did not match the DNA from the original.
And it seemed like they were still going to go kill the guy.
What do you mean?
Because the ending conversation. I mean, they loaded that shotgun in the back of the car.
Yeah.
And I mean, they did discuss in the closing scene or whatever. Are we really gonna go kill this guy?
Yeah.
And, they were like, well, we'll just see when we get there.
Yeah. A lot of loose cannons in the film.
Yeah, it's just
even Mildred herself. As much as I support her actions, she doesn't take any shit. She goes for it.
Yeah,
I think even her son at some point in the film kind of questions that and would rather her think things through a little bit more.
She got out of when one of the mornings she was dropping the son off. She got out because somebody threw a drink on her car, and she got out and kicked like 3 students in the crotch.
Yeah.
And this was before she bombed the police station.
Right. Yeah. And that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
And that. Her bombing the police station though was, if I remember correctly, in retaliation to the billboards being set on fire.
Yeah, because I think we were led to believe, and she believed, Dixon was the one to
Officer
set
Dixon. So, in her belief, or what we'll assume was her belief, that Officer Dixon was the culprit in burning her billboards and destroying them, she went into town and
participated in some illegalism.
That's right. And some super direct action that we are not soliciting any kind of opinion on, but that is what she did. She went in and she blew up the police station.
Yeah, and ended up burning half of Officer Dixon's face off.
Right, because he happened to be picking up some of the things that he had at the station because he was fired. We should have mentioned that.
Yeah, he did get fired, which was good to see.
Right, for throwing red out of the window.
I believe it was also a letter from Willoughby that he was reading, wasn't it?
That sounds right.
I think so. And he had his earbuds in.
Yeah, that's why he didn't know.
That's also like another one of those coincidences that really bothered me. If we can go back to critiquing the film for just a second, how do you not fucking know a building's on fire?
Well, and just the fact that he was there at that moment that she decided to take that kind of action was, that's a little bit coincidental.
Sure.
And of course, how do you not know that the damn
even
things...
with earbuds in? I mean, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I've never experienced it, so
that first explosion from a fucking Molotov cocktail.
It was probably loud. Yeah. Those must be some really good earbuds.
Yeah, noise canceling and all.
Right. So, anyways, yeah, he ended up saving the case file for the Hayes case file from being destroyed from the fire, and this also makes him a little bit redeemable in the eyes of some, and I understand that.
Sure.
It was a little bit of a turning point for Officer Dixon, which that's an important thing to note, that he did maybe work to redeem himself to an extent.
Yeah.
Again, we'll kind of get back to that at the end of the podcast and decide if he really did. So let's focus here on Mildred Hayes' character a little more. We've talked enough about Officer Dixon, and we will talk a little bit more about him. But let's focus on Mildred Hayes, as she is kind of the main character, and it's really centered around her. And she's a badass lady.
Yeah. Don't piss her off.
Absolutely not.
For sure. She will bomb your place of
shit.
establishment,
Yeah.
or kick you in the crotch, or
Yeah.
one of my
or
favorite.
put up some billboards.
Yeah.
Just talking some shit.
Yeah, she's not the lady to mess with. One of my favorite scenes with Mildred was she was out doing some gardening, and the billboards were all in the background, and then suddenly a doe appeared, and I just thought that scene was really good. She goes on to have a conversation with the doe. It was a one-way conversation, but because does can't talk. But she was like, "You're not trying to get me to believe in reincarnation, are you? Because you're pretty, but you ain't her."
You ain't her. Yeah.
I thought that was it was good writing and superb acting on the part of Frances McDormand. I thought that's probably one of my favorite scenes if not the most favorite scene for me, because it's relatable in a way.
Yeah, I think that's the scene that they showed during the Oscars when they announced her as a nominee. So I think that's a popular scene. I think people felt a lot for that scene. I think maybe she felt limited by her abilities to pressure the police force to continue to further their efforts on this issue.
That's really important.
Maybe she felt a little bit removed from it, or she certainly felt that they had not done their due diligence.
Yeah, I thought her desperation came across really well particularly when she was having the conversation with Willoughby about implementing all these like different procedures,
right?
Which is basically it's a total violation of
right,
civil
and he said
rights.
That, and Willoughby said that that we can't do that. That's definitely a violation of civil rights. But because she proposed something along the lines of taking DNA from every
basically
man
taking
and boy
blood
in town or in the area, and just for
and then
no
she
reason.
even zoomed out further by saying like just as soon as a male is born,
right,
just take blood and have it on access.
And there are a lot of things against that.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, you can't.
I understand her desperation, but and that I think that's ultimately what it was trying to get across. Like she was just so frazzled and at the
she did. Yeah, I mean, she gave a shit about her situation and her daughter's case, and that's not. I don't mean to make it sound that she was being selfish or self-centered about it. She was just feeling it, and she was like,
I don't blame her at all.
She wanted some fucking answers. I think she felt maybe limited by that, or maybe that she just wasn't being heard totally by the local police. And she put the fucking billboards up. So she did something about it, and she started that conversation all across town. It's worth noting that there's a scene where she's getting dental work done.
Oh God!
And it's a hard scene to watch, but to describe it, she's getting dental work done. She's in the chair, laid back, and the dentist says something to the effect of, Willoughby's got a lot of friends in this town, or something like that, or how he's a good guy, and something alluding to the fact that he is siding with Willoughby on this billboard situation.
He doesn't numb her. He like starts to drill on her teeth without any Novocaine, and
he's doing this with a little drill in his hands, and what comes next is hard to watch, but she wrestles the drill down on top of his hand and drills through his fingernail into his finger, and it's pretty nasty.
Yeah, it'll take the spunk right out of you, because it's just, I don't know why I said spunk, but
I'm not sure.
Oh well,
that's okay. But yeah, it's hard to watch.
Yeah,
it
for
shows.
sure.
It shows to me, at least, that in these areas, these little towns, all these businesses and this police force and everything, they're interconnected in a way that works often for the establishment's sake. The establishments being the businesses and the police force and the things that quote unquote keep the town going, and the economy, and these things that people place above all else, and above a lot of needs and rights a lot of the time, but they work together in a lot of ways, especially in these kinds of areas, I think. And just like we talked about in California, which is obviously not even this small Midwestern town. It happens,
right,
especially when it's interconnected with the economy of a town like that. Business owners and police force often work hand in hand, and it often doesn't benefit the, maybe the single mother looking for answers of this crime, So I think, I'm not sure how much of that was meant to come across, but I got some of that, coming across in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
That scene, how they're interconnected, and how she was kind of up against it. She had odds that weren't in her favor in the community, and even the religion ties into it as well, because the religious figure of the town stops by. Sits at her kitchen table, and
pastor.
And I don't want to condemn any religious beliefs or anything, but it shows that, again, in a town, religion also, along with in all shapes and forms.
Yeah, it's still every aspect of even a small town is everything has its influence. The police, the small business, and the religion.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And they were all working kind of in concert against her interests, unfortunately, in this scenario. So that's worth noting. But it's also worth noting the financial aspect, the economic aspect, like we talked about.
Yeah.
These businesses being important to the community and such, but also her financial situation. She was multiple times. She was kind of strapped for cash, and was a little bit concerned about paying for these billboards. And at one point, Willoughby threatened to influence the small business that she worked at, and said that at the shop where she worked, her hours could be cut, and that could limit her income to pay for these billboards. And so he was going to use his authority or his power or whatever in this town to go and leverage that against this business to cut her hours, which is not really in the interest of that business.
No.
Really, but it's definitely cutting down.
But the business would be on the side of Mildred, though. It would be on, because if it did begin to affect the small business, they'd be like, well, Mildred, you need to get your shit together and stop all this.
Yeah, they'd be like, you can take those fucking billboards down because this isn't good for our community or whatever. But you know, it's not good for the community is like these unsolved crimes and these crimes happening in the first place. And so you have to go back and, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Limiting free speech, it's a huge thing of that. I think that's a massive undertone of
absolutely
trying to limit free speech and because I mean she did everything by the book to put those billboards up, and the small business owners, the religious people, and the cops were all like, no, you shouldn't do this.
Right, and it shows that when economic interests are at play, the police force and the capitalists and businesses, you know, some religious affiliations will all work in the interest of
maintaining
that status quo, and even at the expense of her speech, or you know, something that's supposed to be championed by many of these groups, you know, in a lot of ways, because I guess the point is that free speech does not always apply to everybody equally, unfortunately.
No.
And what Willoughby was threatening was to limit her ability to express herself freely in this way, because it was inconvenient for him, and because he was in power and had pull with these businesses and religious figures and such. You know, that was going to work against her, and they were going to get their way. And that is a real issue, because you know, everybody likes to talk about free speech, but it's not always. It's really important to note that it's not always as accessible a resource for certain people in situations, especially in oppressed or minority groups, or people like Mildred Hayes, you know, facing an uphill battle.
Sure.
So that's something that really stuck out to me and really bothered me about some of those things, was that, you know, these are American institutions like the police force that are trying to, that are operating here and threatening to limit something that is constitutionally protected.
Yeah.
That's very scary. But moving on, all of these things lead her to feeling as though she had to take drastic action, like burning down the police station, which is, you know, of course, extreme measures, highly illegal, and not necessarily to be condoned, but you know, I don't think the film is condoning it as much as it is showing again that desperation to be heard, and
I think it was coincidental that he was that Officer Dixon was in the building at the time, but it shows like if he was willing to Martin McDonough was willing to sacrifice the convenience of him being there to show that such an individualistic action does indeed have consequences, because there's not to view too far or critique anarchism, but a lot of anarchists do believe in bombing police stations and cop cars, and I think that could be a subtle critique of how individualistic it is, and
egoist and individualist kind of mentalities, even on the left in maybe anarchist circles, and this is not a condemnation of anarchism, because we are a leftist podcast in many different ways, and we represent and support many different facets of the left, but it could have been a critique on some of that individual direct action and the consequences, right or wrong, good or bad, that it can have. Good point. All right, well, we've covered a lot. There's a lot in this film to go over. There's plenty of material here.
Oh, yeah. I really want to get to between our two opinions, whether or not did you think that Dixon ended up redeeming himself?
Well, and that's really tough because, again, he starts out as such an unlikable guy. I don't think that he's fully redeemable or fully redeemed, I guess, by the end of the film. I think he's still on track to make some bad decisions. I think he's still got some really bad ideas about the way the world works.
Yeah.
And but I do think that maybe it did, if anything, it showed, the film was able to show that there are qualities. You know, you're not born a racist. You're not.
Yeah.
You know.
No.
You're not. Maybe that's dependent upon some sort of specific philosophical ideology or something. But I feel pretty confident in saying that, and it's, you know, the society in which that, you know, and the conditions in which that he was raised, that had all this shit just beat into him.
Yeah.
And then he went out and was given a badge and gun, and unfortunately that happens. And he was able to put it into action, and that's whether or not, you know, from like a deterministic point of view, whether or not he can really 100% be held accountable for, he can be held accountable for the actions, and should.
Sure.
And he should have been held more accountable than just being fired.
Yeah,
because he tried to fucking kill a dude, basically.
Yeah, that's attempted murder. Like, throwing somebody out of a fucking window is... Yeah. That's a lot.
Right. So, but I do think it's important that it showed that if anything is to be redeemed, it's that, you know, you do have some sort of choice there.
Sure.
And that's tough too, because again, he was conditioned into this, I guess we're saying. But and a lot of that was kind of determined for him, maybe. But due to a better understanding and maybe different conditions, maybe he could make a turnaround, maybe a full turnaround. I don't know.
Sure, because a lot of people start off on the wrong foot. Not every leftist out there is started out a leftist.
No, and we live in the South too, and I don't want to like make too broad a condemnation of you know, the American South, but there are a lot of...
We're more conditioned to it than
others. There's just a lot of racial undercurrents
Sure.
and things around here and in the U.S. in general, and in a lot of other places, I'm sure. But we did grow up experiencing a lot of those kinds of a lot of that conditioning, maybe.
Absolutely.
And so there are a lot of things there to analyze, and probably more than we could really get into in an hour or whatever. But it's, you know, hopefully the film was thought-provoking in a lot of those ways, and if we can do nothing else but sit here and bullshit on a podcast about what we thought and maybe bring up some of those things, that's cool with me, you know.
Yeah, while there is like a little bit of a character turnaround for him, they are contemplating, like, at the end of the film, like, going and killing somebody rather than letting what naturally should happen is if he did commit this crime and wasn't just bragging to a friend in a bar, this fella who Dixon thought could have been the suspect that raped and killed Mildred's daughter, then the best way to probably let that play out is cross-examine some evidence that of the lady that he supposedly raped or whatever, and the DNA from Dixon scratching the shit out of him, and let the law handle that instead of just killing somebody.
Yeah, and there may be a lot of differences of opinion even on the left in this area too, because we've pointed out the how ineffective that police force is, especially. So
Yeah.
Who knows if they felt that maybe justice wouldn't be done the right way.
That's true, but it wasn't a different city, so
True. So maybe working together in that sense, law enforcement could have gotten something done. Who's to say? But yeah, I think maybe that's why I think he's on the path to make some bad decisions still.
yeah,
But
still.
But again, it's I think that's a really interesting part of the film, and I think Officer Dixon plays a really integral part in this whole story, and raises a lot of questions. Of course, Mildred Hayes is the kind of the center of the film, and Frances McDormand's performance certainly kind of steals the show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be said for other elements of the film, and I think it's a thought-provoking film, if nothing
Absolutely.
else. It was not my favorite film of the year,
No.
but it was thought-provoking, and we've spent an hour talking about it.
Yeah,
so that means something.
Yeah, there was a lot to certainly get into.
And speaking of Frances McDormand's performance, we have to acknowledge the speech that she gave after winning the Oscar for Best Actress.
Yeah.
In which she had all of the women there. Was it the women nominees?
I think. Any woman that was nominated for anything.
Yeah, she had them all stand up, and there were a lot of women that were nominated for a lot of things, and it was a pretty great thing to see.
Yeah, it was a powerful
right
moment.
And so that was really a cool thing to see, and I'm glad that she used that moment to recognize and show some kind of solidarity, I guess, and recognize women in the industry, and also she at the end of her speech she said, and quote, "I have 2 words to leave you with tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Inclusion writer." End quote.
Yeah, I had no idea what that was at first.
I didn't either. And that may be part of the problem. But
absolutely.
Not enough people knew about it. But I mean, maybe it's kind of an industry thing, or. But anyways, so.
Tell us, Mike, what is an inclusion writer?
According to NPR, there's an article titled "What's an Inclusion Writer?" Here's the story behind Frances McDormand's closing words. So I'm going to give them credit for this, for helping us out here. I believe this was by Colin Dwyer of NPR. And here it says, "Simply put, it's a stipulation that actors and actresses can ask or demand to have inserted into their contracts, which would require a certain level of diversity among a film's cast and crew."
Ooh, fist up in solidarity.
That's good news. So, also in this article, there is a tweet from Merriam-Webster that says, "Inclusion is our top search of the night, followed by cinematography, in memoriam, feminism, and writer. #Oscars." So again, thought-provoking.
Yeah, absolutely.
The film and her speech led to people looking up all these things and finding ways to define these things that they had heard that were, that are now really gonna be important to the industry.
Yeah, and hopefully leads to a lot more diversity and just opening conversation more, because not enough people. We're leftist, and the term totally flew by us.
Right, and we don't want to claim to know too much of anything about any of these groups when it comes to what they experience, or try to explain or take anything away from any kind of group like that, or oppressed group or minority. Sure. We don't want to mansplain shit or whatever. So we're gonna do our best not to fuck that up.
Yeah.
So when it comes to these things, we're gonna try and give it to you in their own words, because that's the way they wanted it to be conveyed.
Yeah.
So anyways, I have certainly enjoyed the discussion.
Absolutely.
Hopefully our listeners have enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully you have some thoughts of your own out there. So please, again, feel free to shoot us an email at leftistfilmpodcast@gmail.com and let us know your thoughts and what's going on. So yeah, please let us know what you're thinking, and if there are other films that you'd like us to talk about or that you have thoughts on, please feel free to shoot us an email on that as well. Check back with us next week for our discussion of The Shape of Water, which won all kinds of awards.
Well deserved.
Well deserved. I thought it was a really good film. It won Best Picture, along with I believe Guillermo del Toro got Best Director. And there's a lot in that film to discuss and discover as well. So we are on BlogSpot Radio. We're also on iTunes, so please check us out wherever you can.
Leave us a rating to help extend our reach.
Yeah.
Because we are brand new, and we could use all the help we could get.
Indeed. Again, thanks for tuning in, and it's been fun. Thanks again, and we will see you next week. This is Mike.
I'm Mitchell, and this has been the Leftist Film Analysis Podcast. See you next week.
All right, we're signing off. Thanks.
Oh, shit.